Alpine Liquid Fertilizers is your full season crop fertility specialist from start to finish. Visit alpinepfl.com for more.
You're listening to Ruminating with RealAg, the podcast that chews on the latest in beef production, with your host, Amber Bell.
Hi, I'm Amber Bell, and this is Ruminating with RealAg. Today, I'm really excited to have Connor English with me. Connor works for Covers & Co. and runs his own ranch, does a lot of what he preaches, he actually practices. So I'm excited for this conversation, and welcome, Connor. It's great to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me on today, Amber.
Okay, so let's start off with the basics. Tell us a little bit about your operation. Tell us what you have going on, because you have a lot going on.
Yeah, we like to stay pretty busy. I don't know if that's just the name of the game or what, but always find ourselves trying something new, that's for sure. And so yeah, we're located our family farm just west of Rivers. Fifth generation on the farm. Come back to the farm in 2022. That spring, so I've been here for a couple of years now, and I farm alongside my parents, Brian and Leanne, and my wife Kyla, and our son, who's just about 11 months old, Coulter. So he's hopefully going to be the generation number 6 on the farm, which is pretty special. And yeah, so we've been, our farm actually this year, 2024 would be 126 years of our family being here on this home farm and living right in the yard site, which is pretty special. And yeah, just to look back on how long we've been here and how much the farm has changed over the years is pretty cool. So mixed farm years and years ago, grain and livestock, just like everyone else had. Transitioned my grandparents. They had a variety of things. My grandpa was big into pigs when he was younger, and my grandma and grandpa, they milked cows and were cream shippers, as well as grain farming on the side. After my dad was done high school, the dairy kind of phased out. They lost quite a few of their hired hands. They had 3 daughters and a son, so when they all left the farm, things changed quite a bit, and grandma and grandpa moved more into grain farming, and they had some chickens, and then dad returned to the farm here in the late 90s, I guess I would say, and predominantly grain. Purchased some cows the year before BSE hit, and yeah, we've been kind of transitioning ever since. We did rent out some land for a few years for grain production to the neighbors, and we've kind of gone into solely livestock, cattle right now, but we've diversified our what we have for cows on the farm, and definitely changed our grazing practices and how we just overlook things big time here in the last 4 or 5 years. So yeah, right now we're just solely cattle at the moment. I see some massive benefits moving forward into the future to diversify some more, and to maybe add some annual cash cropping into it as well, or another division of livestock for that matter. Diversity, I know I'm going to bring that word up a lot today in this conversation, but it's something I think about just about every day, and how beneficial it can be on so many different levels of a farming system, and really put ourselves in a good position moving forward to be the most profitable and be as resilient as possible. So yeah,
That's amazing. And so we're talking today about cover crops, but we're also talking about winter feeding methods and what that has looked like on your farm. And one of the things that I find really interesting is I've talked to people all across the country, in the province here, and so many people that are getting into cover crops and doing it are new farmers, like first generation, maybe second generation farmers. So it's really fun to be able to have a conversation with you, having that history and seeing that transition happen. So yeah, we're going to be talking about winter feeding. So what are you currently doing this year with winter feeding, and what have you grown in order to support that?
I guess just another what we do here around here. I started with Covers & Co. here this spring in June. I had the opportunity to join the team and become the Manitoba territory manager this spring, and it's really opened my eyes even more. I was in depth into the regen soil health world here years ago, coming out of college. Kind of took away $25 canola and $15 wheat. Takes a toll on some people's thought processes, but coming into a year like this, holy smokes, you see the benefits of some of these practices we're doing, and really look into the future more and see the benefits that they're going to have moving forward. So yeah, really excited to be joining the Covers & Co team here this past spring. It feels like I've been here for a while. It's only been a few short months. So really great team to work with there. And that's kind of opened up our eyes here this past summer on some winter feeding options that we're doing on our farm and why we're doing them. Last winter started looking into, we had done cover crops years ago. Dad was blending his own cover crops probably 6-8 years ago, closer to 10 years ago. Majority of that was getting baled for dry feed. We would do some haylage bales as well. But yeah, cutting our synthetic fertilizers completely to nothing, reducing our synthetic chemicals as well, and just trying to grow as much plant biomass as possible. I feel like we were really in a good position and doing a few of the principles on the soil health principles correctly, but we were missing out on a few things. Animal integration into the land to cycle those nutrients, and crop rotations just to make sure we're putting ourselves in a good position to actually grow a good cover crop, and not get stuck in a bit of a mess with some weed issues we were lacking on. So we took a few years away from some cover crops. We started growing some more corn on our farm probably about 6 years ago. I think was our first corn crop that we grew. And then again this year, just talking with more people, getting back into this space a little bit more in depth and getting really excited about it, and had some opportunities. And we thought, well, we've got some good options for some fields to grow some cover crops this year. Just they've been in a different rotation for a few years. We felt they were in a good state to really succeed. So we went ahead and chose a few different cover crop blends. We went with Covers & Co full season blend on some land that we sowed down with our perennial forages that we were seeding down this year. We took that as a companion crop as silage at the end of July. So we put that into a silage grazing pile that I can talk a little bit more about later on. And then we also went with a warm season cover crop mix that was sowed at the end of June, and we swathed it here at the start of September. And we're going to utilize that for swath grazing here this fall with our cow herd. So yeah, we've used a couple different cover crops this year. Corn as well is another big one in our farm that we utilize for winter feeding quite a bit. I do really like that. The corn, it's got its high risks. Obviously, it's a very expensive crop to put in the ground. But if things do align and you get good growing conditions, we can really reap the benefits of a high yielding crop, and be really profitable growing some of this corn and utilizing it in different forms. We graze quite a bit of corn. We have been for the last few years. And then last year we tried the silage pile wire feeding and had tremendous success with it. So we're going to look to do a little bit more of that this year, and just finding ways to kind of, I guess, hedge our risk across the winter. We don't know what the weather is going to be like, and trying to set ourselves up for a multitude of different winter grazing practices, just so that we're not stuck with one sole practice through the winter and we get into a bad weather environment and we're just hating our life. But
yeah,
we can kind of transition everything and have options, I guess, and utilize them when the weather allows. Should put ourselves in a good position to keep costs as low as possible and bring as much profit back to the farm as we can.
So a couple questions there. For one, how many head are you running? And then the other question that I have has to go with, you mentioned rotation with cover crops, which is something that I haven't really heard or thought of previously, because you think, well, there's a mix. I don't need a rotation, right? So how many head, and speak into that rotation on cover crops a little bit.
So yeah, right now we've got like I said, we've got quite a diverse class of cattle, I guess I would say, on our farm. Majority of our cows, we had about 130 that we calved in 30 days in May into June. Last year we pulled bulls after 30 days, so we calved from May 15th to June 15th. Try and be on stockpiled forage with minimal supplement at that time of year. And then we get into a pretty intensified summer rotational or adaptive multi-paddock grazing, I guess I should say. And then we have a group of fall calvers that we're just wrapping up calving right now. Had some opportunity to purchase in some lower valued animals this past winter and spring. They look phenomenal, and hoping that they might be for sale here in the next month or so, as we see what the cattle market's going to do. the past couple of years, we've been backgrounding all of our spring calving calves throughout the winter, dry allotting them for the most part, or feeding them out in the field close to the yard, and then grazing them throughout the summer and selling in September. Just sold our yearlings here last week, and we're very, very happy to be a part of that with the cattle industry the way it is right now. But yeah, we've kind of diversified. We tend to keep we preg check in the fall usually on our spring calving cows just to have a good idea where we're going to be at moving into the springtime, and if we're needing to take advantage of some market opportunities, I guess, for purchasing more, and then just see where we're at. I guess we haven't been selling open cows in the fall or early winter the last few years. Just being put in a position to sort them off kind of mid-spring or into the summer months to capitalize a little bit on that higher market trend there. But yeah, we definitely have a lot of different classes of cattle, I guess, in our place, and very open to just taking advantage of some lower valued animals whenever they come our way. But yeah, bulk of our cows are in May calving group that we've kind of designed over the last couple of years, and they've been doing very well for us. So.
And how many head are you running into for the winter? Are you taking into the winter?
Right now we're at about 180 cows, and with about 130 calves right now. Obviously, we're going to see where these fall calvers, they've all pretty much calved, I guess, now too. But we're going to see where they're at, and our numbers swing
all over the place.
I am if things go really well, we'll have a group of calves or pairs to sell here this fall, if the market allows, and we'll look to buy back some lower valued animals of some sort prior to December, if the market allows for that. And yeah, like I said, we've been backgrounding our calves for the most part the last few years, but this market the way it is, I think we're going to hopefully maybe take advantage of that and sell some steers here before the new year. So yeah, very open to just taking advantage of that, making a win, I guess you could say, as much as possible on whatever class of animal we have, and buying back if it makes sense.
And do you wean going into winter feeding, or are you going to have the calves on the cows throughout winter?
So last year we had the calves on the cows as long as we've ever had. We weaned on the third, just about the end of the third week of January, on those May June calving calves. We corn grazed from about end of October right until middle of January, and then transitioned them onto a silage ration that they were going to be fed once weaning. So that was the latest we've gone, had really good success with that. Calves were rolling onto winter feed way prior to weaning. Their transition period in that weaning process was awesome. They never lost a beat. I think last year was our best year for background in calves. I don't think we treated one for sickness and whatnot. Just had a really smooth transition for them moving into the winter. And they had been on some really hardy feed for about a month or 2 months before weaning. So yeah, very open. If the market allows and puts us in a position we need to take advantage of that, we will earlier wean. We've weaned in middle of November, start of November before. Just kind of where we're at for feed and quality is more or less the biggest thing. And where we're sitting at for that. So last year,
so you're not just doing adaptive grazing, but you're doing adaptive management at the same time.
Yeah,
like for the animal.
Trying to implement that as much as possible. If we're in a position that we have high quality feed that we can graze with cows throughout the winter months, and the calf being on them is not going to be a detriment to them, and ease up on our management, obviously, not having to feed multiple groups of animals, we're going to take advantage of that. We've been in a position, though, before where our cows wintered on straw and DDGs and camelina meal. So we pulled calves off earlier that year just to ensure we kept body condition up on the cows, and we could put higher quality feed into those calves in a weaned state. So definitely just kind of play it by ear, be ready for a multitude of different decisions, and the plans change quite a bit around here all the time.
That's super cool. Okay, and so let's get into cover crops, because that's kind of your thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, speak to the rotation on the cover crops, and then what kind of mixes are you looking at? So you mentioned you're using 2 different mixes. How many different types of grasses? Like, what are we looking at for those?
So yeah, I see a lot of value in the mixed farming system and really looking at the farm as a system. I think we've gotten to a point in modern agriculture where we transition. The mixed farms are becoming fewer and fewer all the time. But we go into years like this, and we see the value in having that mixed farm, just setting yourselves up for a multitude of different income streams. Obviously, the last few years, the grain prices have been very, very strong. Producers have done very, very well, but we move into a year like this. Some regions around here, yields are dropped back from what they were. Inputs were just as high as they've ever been, and commodity markets have also obviously drawn back quite a bit. So it's just not the same. But we go into a year like this. Finally, the cattle are at a point. There's been an excess amount of feed in my region for sure, and the prices are really good. So just finding ways to kind of incorporate the mixed farm as much as possible, and seeing benefits that each can have on either enterprise, I guess I would say, in more cases than not, and really just trying to work on a system. That's, I guess, where I move into the rotation on the cover crop side of things. And just adding value. Some people are going to be in a position, they grow a full season cover crop or that type of thing every year. Their goals are just to reduce input costs, put their soils in a really good state for resiliency moving forward, not being so reliant on market trends and weather, just because their soils are in a position to really drag them through anything. But I really see the value in having a rotation, reaping the benefits from not only improving our soil with cover crops and a good healthy rotation, to breaking up obviously different patterns in management and utilizing tools at different times to benefit ourselves moving forward and really put ourselves in the most profitable system. I put some goals together here last year, just what we wanted to do on our farm, or what I wanted to see, I guess, myself, moving forward, and had a goal definitely to reduce our synthetic fertilizer usage by 75% over 10 years. If we can be in a position to do that, I think we're going to be much more resilient. We're not so reliant on that cost of product. And the only way to do that, though, is to incorporate our livestock onto our annual cropping ground. So right now, our annual cropping ground is a small portion of what our farm is. It's only about 12% of our acres that we're growing for annual production. This year it was into all livestock feed, just seeing the value, and obviously the cattle market was doing very well. Thought, let's take this opportunity, grow a bunch of feed. If we can carry some over, great. And we'll see what next year moves into. But I guess I see on the cover crop side of things, for instance, we've got a field right now that we're going to swath graze this fall. We grew a full warm season cover crop on it. Took advantage of the high heat units in the summertime to grow a lot of biomass, and we're going to cycle those nutrients right back onto the land with the cattle. There's going to be nothing leaving. Obviously, just doing that for 1 year is not going to put us in a position to completely cut all our synthetic fertility usage off, and really be like, oh, I need to pull X amount of bushels off next year if I'm growing a grain crop because I fed my cows out there last year. Yes,
Right.
1 year is great, but how can we fit this into the system? I see it kind of fitting if we can move some sort of a grazing crop into our cropping rotation moving forward every 2 to 3 years. If we're able to cycle those nutrients back every 2 to 3 years on that land, we're going to put ourselves in a position where we're not so reliant on bringing in extra fertility in a synthetic form. And just putting our soils in a better state for water holding capacity and nutrient cycling and a multitude of things, and then we can hopefully reap the benefits of growing some cash crops and taking advantage when the commodity markets are high, to grow some cash crops at a low cost and really increase our profitability. There's some mixed farms across Western Canada that have been doing this for many years. And I really look up to them because I think it's a beautiful system. Having the blend of the two, obviously there's going to be a little bit more work that goes into having a mixed farm. There totally is, but the benefits that each can reap from each other is awesome. You look at some of the byproducts off an annual crop, people that graze chaff, or that they can grow a secondary crop with their annual crop and kick cows out onto regrowth in the fall to cycle nutrients. Massive benefit there. Obviously, the cattle being out there to cycle nutrients, if we can do that over a long period of time, we're hopefully going to be in a position when we do grow an annual crop and harvest the grains away from it. I guess our upfront costs on inputs should be in a position to be lower, and obviously increase the profitability on that land, and just not be so reliant on so many outside sources that we can't control.
Right. And
So
then you get that diversity too, that you get to play the market a little bit, right? Depending on
absolutely,
what's up, what's down, where you get to
yeah,
go. So that's really, really cool.
yeah.
So you're seeding, I'm guessing that you're seeding using the typical conventional seeder type idea. Um, have you seen a lot of people using drone seeding? Is that something that you guys typically recommend, or is it something that you're like, yeah, you're going to see a lot better results if you're using a seeder?
So on the Covers and Co blend, we're currently working on a drone specific blend right now, more on a perennial side of things, for adding legumes to an existing pasture field. But for the bulk of our blends that we offer, we've got a cool season, a full season, a warm season are our three main ones. And we do have a couple specialty ones as well. The seed to soil contact is the most important thing when growing any crop. Putting ourselves in a good position to succeed right off the bat, we're going to be ready to take advantage of whatever the weather does happen. And just, I kind of look at it, and I don't know why, when you hear the word cover crops, we just think of broadcast seeding instantly. I
Right,
don't know if
right.
it's because in the US, they do that much more than we do up here, just because of their longer growing season. Some folks will be able to go out there and broadcast seed after harvest. And obviously they can be in a position to capture a lot more moisture and sunlight later into the fall than we do. But when we look at a cover crop, we look at it just like you would any cash crop farmer would look at their wheat or their canola. Get the seed in the ground in a good form so that we can succeed right away. If that seed's not put in the ground with good seed to soil contact at a good soil temperature, at a good depth, right away we're putting ourselves in a position maybe not to maximize our success. So if we can do the work right off the start, it can be a multitude of different drills. People are having success with disc drills and regular hoe drills, and old, new, doesn't matter. But if we can get that seed in the ground at a proper temperature, at the correct depth, and really get good seed to soil contact, we're going to be putting ourselves in a position to succeed. So.
That's great. And what's the mix like that you're typically seeding? Like how many different varieties are you putting into the ground?
So the Covers and Co blend has been designed over the last 6 years, I guess, that Joe and Travis have been after this venture that they went on. The full season blend is to be blended to be in a position to, I would say myself, it's the bulletproof blend. It's going to put yourself in a position to succeed on a multitude of different regions throughout the country, different soil types, different weather conditions. It's a mix of 16 different species. There's cool and warm season species within that, grasses, legumes, broadleafs, a mixture of everything.
So something's going to grow.
Exactly. And that's where I look at that as being very beneficial. For instance, this year on my farm, we had 100 acres of full season cover crop in. Majority of it had perennials coming up within it, but we had one field without perennials. Those fields were all within a quarter mile from each other. They were on three different sides of a road. There's a speed curve that goes through our farm kind of on the highway. You could go into each of those fields. They were all within a quarter mile of each other. And what was growing out in that field was completely different in each one. And there was some bulk species that were growing in each, but I would go into one field and find turnips that were in one. Well, there was more radishes in this one, and more warm season species that ended up coming up in this other field. And it's just to go off of soil type. Every field is completely different. Our growing conditions are going to be completely different, even within a quarter mile of each other. One field might get more rain than the other, and vice versa. But the soil types is the biggest one. So putting ourselves in a position, we have a multitude of species to go out there, a multitude of different types of species, just on their makeup, whether they're a grass or a legume or a broadleaf, with the biggest goal of just getting something to grow, something to capture the 96% of what makes a plant grow: sunlight, right, water, and carbon. If we can put a plant there to capture sunlight in some form, something is going to grow, and it's going to be the correct soil type for that plant to succeed.
So with a mix like that, though, I know I've throughout the summer I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of canola growers and wheat growers and stuff. And it's definitely a different mindset then because the conventional way of thinking about it would be like, well, if I'm seeding this, I want to see it all grow, right? Because that's the mix I'm seeding. So is there a switch in mindset that you need to do? And is there any concern that, hey, I planted, this, I'm only seeing maybe 8 out of the 16 species out there. Was it a waste? And what would you say to that?
So I definitely hear that quite a bit. Some people will say, well, I didn't have much of this in the mix, and I sure wish I had that. Well, and then my honest response all the time is it's a soil quality thing because I see it right on my farm. Some species did not grow at all. I could not see, I know in our full season blend, I did not see any soybeans. There was nothing, hardly anything. One or two out of 100 acres that I walked through that I could find. I grow across a creek into our warm season mix. What do I see over there? Soybeans are growing.
Soybeans.
It's a complete different soil type, and a different quality, and obviously in that circumstance, it was a different seeding date, which probably played a big factor in what did grow and what did have the opportunity to grow. So yeah, some people definitely for sure they get in the I should see 16 different species growing here. And I really recommended them try that crop in a different field away from the field that you tried it in the first time. I bet you're going to see different species succeed in that area than the field that you first tried it on. And I think the biggest thing is our soils are so different. We've gotten to a point where we want one specific crop to grow on that soil that year. We're gonna do everything in our power to make that one species grow. If we don't have the
Right. And to
correct
make that soil fit the species.
Exactly. So we have to make the species fit our soil type and put ourselves in a good position to succeed because the soil is given. It's right there. We have it. We have the opportunity. We don't know what it's going to do if we only try a few different crops in it. If we put ourselves in a position with a 16-way cover crop mix, we have a multitude of different species that are going to thrive off of some things that we would have never even tried. And the beautiful thing about the cover crops is it's high quality livestock feed. Everything that we put in there can be consumed by an animal, and every different species is going to do something to the soil in every different state, I guess I should say. So yeah, just putting ourselves in a position to succeed with the soil that we have is so important. Because in most cases, we have no idea what species should be growing in that soil that we're given.
So would you take that then? And, okay, so this year you saw that, yeah, soybeans actually did grow here really easily, right? Would you decide then that maybe for the next summer you're going to want to actually seed soybeans into that field? And maybe, like, would you use that as a decision-making tool?
Maybe, but I would say the weather conditions play a large role in that too.
Right.
We were so cool and wet here this spring, out my way, just west of the rivers, that our cool season species in the mixes completely took off and took up that entire canopy. They were just capturing as much sunlight as they could because it was in perfect growing conditions for itself. The warm season species in the full season mix didn't have the opportunity to get up and going because it was May 17th and we were seeding it. And we really didn't hit hot and dry weather until the end of June. So it had almost a month and a half of opportunity for just the cool seasons to thrive at their full potential, and not leaving much sunlight opportunity for the warm seasons to succeed. We go into a position where we didn't seed our warm season until the third week of June. It was perfect conditions for that warm season to succeed. We've seen beautiful diversity right across the entire blend at that state of end of June. And we move into July and it got a little hotter and drier in our area. The worm seasons just completely took off. It was perfect conditions for them to grow. And that's really where I see the massive benefits in multi-species cover crops. We do not know what the weather is going to be. There's no way for us to control it. All we can control is what we're putting in the ground. And so if we're putting it in the ground in an opportunity to succeed over a vast amount of days, whatever weather is coming our way, something is going to grow and something is going to give us success out in that field. Obviously, this year we had an amazing month of September. We had moisture, extra heat that we haven't seen in a few years. We just got our first hard frost, I would say, last night, October 4th, I guess, with -4 or -5. Prime condition for plants to continue to grow. Our warm season mix that we had does have cool season species in it. And thank goodness it does, because it took advantage of this beautiful weather we had in the month of September. And we've got excellent regrowth within the swaths after being swathed for a month. If we hadn't been in a position for cool season species to thrive after cutting, we would have left all that opportunity, and sunlight and moisture would have been completely wasted. And we would not have captured any of that through the month of September.
Right. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about economics then, because if we go back to that argument, like, hey, I've seeded down 16 species, I'm only seeing 10. What does the economics look like on that? Because you're paying for that seed, you're paying to put it down, right? What does the economics look like on it?
So I guess on the right away, I'll say what we did on our farm this year. We put down our full season cover crop, for instance. We had one little field that didn't have perennials growing in within it. So the main look at that, yes, the seed is at a price. It is the top quality seed that you're going to be purchasing. We've selected the species as much as possible to thrive in such a vast amount of different environments across Western Canada. We're putting the best seed with the best germ rates in the ground right off the hop. We're in a position, obviously, we cannot spray in crop. So we do a pre-burn off prior to emergence on that crop. We had really good luck this year with hitting some weed seeds just prior to the cover crop emerging out of the ground. And that has kept that field really nice and clean throughout the entire year. Obviously, our previous management for a few years prior to that put ourselves in a good position where we didn't have extreme weed pressure moving into this year. And that's where the rotation really comes into a factor, and putting yourself in a position to succeed. So right away, our seed costs, we're right in that $80 an acre range. Obviously, a beautiful thing where I'm at and across Western Canada, there's been a lot of funding available for growing cover crops the last few years. I was very lucky in our area right now. We're able to get $35 an acre back for growing that crop. So right away, that puts our costs on our seed down quite significantly right away. Our fertility on that side of things, since we have legumes in the mix on a crop like this, we inject them with an inoculant to allow those legumes to fixate nitrogen in the soil and provide nitrogen for other plants and not just themselves. So we reduced our synthetic imprint right away and only did 40 pounds of nitrogen, which is the recommended amount to utilize kind of in a full season cover crop, so that we're not putting ourselves in a position for those legumes to not produce any extra than what they need. And we're pretty much giving away free nitrogen that those legumes have the ability to make. There's a high percentage of peas in the mix. Obviously, I stated soybeans. Hairy vetch is another one. They all are nitrogen fixing legumes. So they're going to feed the soil, feed the other species that are thriving off of nitrogen usage, obviously, at different rates. And there's a lot of free energy that can be created just with utilizing some of these legumes in the mix. So right away, we cut away a big portion of our synthetic fertilizers. For instance, on our corn, we were up at about 105 pounds of actual N. On our cover crop, we were down to about 40. So right away, there is a massive difference in the check that we're having to write for that crop to grow. And the biggest opportunity I see on the cover crop side of things is we put the seed in the ground, usually in the spring. We get a cutting 60 to 70 days after emergence. And then if the weather is there and puts us in a good position to succeed, we have species in the mix that have the opportunity to regrow after that initial cutting. Some species might have been really late germinating, and they might just be getting going when that first cutting is taking place. So they're going to be ready to really go if the weather allows for some good opportunity. So just this year alone, our one field of full season, which I would say is probably on the lower end of production on a regrowth side of things from what I've seen across the province this summer, I'm thinking we're in the region of about 20 animal unit days an acre on regrowth grazing. That's set aside from just shy of 3 bales an acre of dry hay that we took off. which I haven't weighed any of the bales yet, but I'm going to guess in the 1,300 pound range. And we were just shy of 3 bales an acre. So if we put just that 20 animal unit days an acre of regrowth grazing this fall that we're going to have with our fall calvers, for me to buy stored hay in my area, I'm in the 7 to 8 cents a pound range to get it to my yard and set it out in the field to bale graze or feed it or whatever. That's just the cost of it. People can say they can buy 5 cent hay, and good on you if you can. The last few times that I've bought hay, it is darn close to 8 cents a pound by the time I get it into the yard. The trucking just costs so much. There's nothing we can do about it. So if I'm putting up 8 cent hay against that 20 animal unit days an acre, I'm in a position to be almost looking at a $35 an acre opportunity cost just on those 20 animal unit days an acre. So right away there, we look at $35 an acre on regrowth opportunity just
on
because
regrowth alone, and that's not even
just regrowth alone.
bales.
That's not to mention the initial cutting that we took off. That is a massive cut in what our seed cost was right off the hop. Like we're getting darn close to what half of our seed costs were initially in the spring, just on the regrowth grazing side of things. Not to mention the weed suppression that we had because we had a living root moving into the fall. Didn't give opportunity for weeds to grow after that initial cutting. We were able to utilize sunlight and moisture and capture as much carbon as possible throughout those later months of obviously this year. It's been August and September. We've had 60 days of just awesome capturing weather, taking advantage of that, having our soils covered. They're not blowing in the wind. When we get a mass windstorm, which we have seen a ton of soil blowing in Manitoba this year, which is another topic for another day.
The last few years out here, it's been really bad.
There's been a multitude of benefits to having that crop in a regrowth state. Obviously, every year we're not going to get good rain or good sunlight after that initial cutting, but usually we're setting ourselves up in a position where if growing conditions aren't great off the start in that first 60 to 70 days of that crop's life, hopefully we can gain back some good growing conditions on the back half, and kind of vice versa. If we get really good growing conditions off the start, we're probably going to reap the benefit of a higher yielding crop right off the start. And maybe the conditions aren't going to be great later on, but good thing we were able to reap the benefits early. And in a year like this, I would say we were about average. I was pretty happy what we got off of that field, just on its background history and what we've gotten before. But having the ability for those plants to regrow and this beautiful weather that we've had for 2 months after the initial cutting has really been the biggest benefit ever, because of all that value add we've added to that crop.
Right. And there's a lot of little points that can move up or down in the system there when it comes to the economics, right? I mean, cattle markets drop, which they're really high right now. They've for the last little bit. That's going to change the amount that you're making, the profit that you're making off of it. Government funding. Yep. That might not always be a scenario. So how much play do you have with growing like the cover crop you did this summer? How much room for movement do you have in there? Let's say you have bad weather or the environmental conditions just aren't there. Yeah, what's that, wiggle room?
Well, I guess the difference right there, like if we grow and we're growing corn as our other crops, we've got cover crops and corn growing this year. Right off the bat, we didn't get our corn in the ground until the 31st of May this year, which was about a week to 10 days later than we normally do. And thank goodness we didn't, because the weather conditions were terrible in May to grow corn. We were just not set up. Honestly, more people should have pulled the plug on the corn because of just the risk that was going to be. Yes, we did get some good, obviously we had high soil moisture and had some really good hot weather for that corn to succeed later in the summer. But right off the bat, there was about a 2-week period there where I was pretty worried that we were not even going to have 2-inch corn by the 4th of July, just because the growing conditions were not nearly what they needed to be. And thank goodness the backside of the summer has been how it is, and the corn's been able to mature properly. But right away there, we look at that in an instance. If we hadn't heated up in June like we did and progressed to a position for that corn crop to succeed, I try and budget corn off about 15 ton an acre in our area. If it hadn't heated up any more than it did, we probably would have been in a position where we would have been chopping this weekend lots of 11 and 12 ton corn And that gets quite costly when our cost of productions are in the 450
So
range,
high.
400 to 450 range on corn in our area. That gets very costly right away. So we look at a cover crops comparison. Our seed costs, yes, are in that $80 to $90 an acre with inoculant, but right away we're reducing. We only have one chemical pass. We're not doing two. We're in a position where our synthetic fertilizer usage is quite a bit lower than we would be in a corn crop. Obviously, the yield potential is quite big, and the differences there. But just looking at our opportunity on that cover crop over 4 or 5 months compared to a 4-month corn, right away we had a plant that was green and growing by about the 25th of May this year, and it is still green and growing right now on October 4th. Our corn didn't come out of the ground until about the second week of May or June, sorry, and it started shutting down and not doing any positive impacts to the soil after it hit maturity at about the start of September when it tasseled. So right there, we were only a few months where that cover crop is that opportunity for a green living root from the end of May right until October now. And the next 2 weeks look really good. And I really feel like we'll have a lot of cool season species that continue to grow until we get consecutive killing frosts into later October and November. So right there, I just look at our opportunities and the ability to grow. Yes, I really like corn because of the ability for it to ton into the 20 ton an acre and produce some really cost-effective feed. But right away, right up front, it is a very costly crop for us to put up. And if the weather
there's more risk.
there absolutely is. If the weather conditions aren't perfect for that crop to grow, our tonnage is going to be affected so significantly, even with that high input crop cost. So even at $90 an acre on our seed for our cover crops, we're reducing our synthetic imprint. We're utilizing it in the rotation some way to reap benefits on other crops down the road, especially if we can integrate livestock into it. Our upfront costs on a cover crop are significantly less, with the opportunities are much wider, I would say, on a growing season instance than corn.
So you would say cover crops are a lower risk than growing something like corn? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's great. And so because you've tried so many different things, and I mean, I've talked to you before, we have, we haven't even gotten into all the different things you have tried. What are some of the biggest challenges that you face as you've put new production practices into play on your farm?
I guess probably some of the things would just be more on a labor side of things when grazing some crops. Obviously, we get into corn grazing and that sort of things, harden the fencing if we have bad snow in the winter. We try moving our cows multiple times a day.
Through the winter as well?
Multiple times a day, but in corn grazing every day or every other day, just to reduce the risk of acidosis and grain overload. So those sorts of things have been some struggle. Obviously, off-site watering systems have been a pain in the butt over the last few years, but we've put ourselves in positions that our systems are in a spot to succeed more days than not now, just with some improved infrastructure and whatnot. I guess on the cover crop side of things, just being in a position for that crop really to thrive. Obviously, if we have a 14 or 16 way species mix, we can't go in there if we've got a bad flush of thistles or wild millet that we deal with quite frequently on our farm. So being in a position to have a clean field off the start, putting in a mix such as a cover crop that we know we're only going to have one shot to clean that field up and really allow all the species to thrive at their full potential, if there isn't pressure from outside factors such as weeds. That has been a struggle in the past, absolutely. We did a few years where there wasn't much nutrient cycling happening, and that's another struggle as well. If we're trying to reduce our synthetic imprint, but not cycling the nutrients back onto that land, either in the form of grazing, manure spreading, or synthetic fertility, it's really hard to get anywhere if some sort of nutrient cycling isn't happening, because we are just mining what is in the soil. So I think just becoming cautious of those things and knowing what we're doing at a one this year might affect 5 years down the road because we did this. And I think, for instance, on our swath grazing or our corn grazing this year, we're obviously cycling all those nutrients right back onto the soil, putting ourselves in a position, hopefully 10 years down the road, to be able to reap the benefits of that if we continue to do it every couple of years, just to reduce our synthetic imprint right away. So there definitely has been a lot of challenges with trying a multitude of different things. Some days getting in the tractor and going to feed a bale of hay is much easier than trudging out through the snow to reel up some wire that the cows ran through or the deer hauled down. But I definitely just see our risk. We're just trying to spread that as much as possible, just so that we can be as profitable as possible. There's going to be some challenges we face, and the beautiful thing is, usually if we're going through that challenge, there's someone else that has dealt with the issues as well. Trying to just surround myself with as many people as possible that have been trying similar things to us, just to chat with them. What works, what doesn't work, what was hard on your farm that maybe worked on mine, how can maybe we find a way to make it go better on yours, kind of thing. But there definitely has been. Fencing would be the one thing right off the hop. We've kind of transitioned what we're utilizing for fencing and how to put ourselves in a position once again to succeed every day, so we're not dragging wire through the snow and
So what are some of your fixes for that, for the fencing, especially winter fencing?
We've had good luck in our corn. We go out in the fall and we pound posts we make paddocks similar to how we have our pastures, I guess, set up. We set our pastures up either 330 feet or 660 feet wide. We've been very lucky. We've added water infrastructure to all those to make that possible with a pipeline, and just for the grazing impactability. So our cows get really used to being in long, narrow paddocks throughout the summertime, obviously. And so we've been implementing that in our winter feeding systems, just to make fencing every day in the winter much easier. If we do 2 days of it in the fall before we have cattle in there, before the weather gets bad, we can go out and roll out wire and roll up wire within half an hour to 45 minutes every day. Get a little bit of exercise. We get a better visual look on our cattle. And they're just in a better position to not have grain overload and acidosis, especially in the corn, but also on a utilization side of things. The way we've been setting up our paddocks, just to really impact every acre as much as possible, and have a cow kind of either in the realm of that area at least once, taking down whether it be swaths or corn grazing, pardon me. So yeah, we've tried a multitude of different things. L7L aircraft cable we've been using to split up our paddocks in the corn, just for an easy teardown. I've been really liking the Gallagher turbo braid on a daily move wires. All our pastures are set up with single strand high tensile wire. I really like that product. We can set it up just about as fast as we can set up temporary wire, and it's there. So especially in a pasture setting, if it's going to be in pasture production for at least 5 years, if we can go out in year 1 and set up high tensile, and maybe that comes out in year 6 to go to annual cropping, I can tear that high tensile down pretty fast. And I never have to touch it again for those 5 years, other than our daily move wires, which are a lot shorter because we have our paddocks set up that way. So we've been using more temporary stuff, obviously, in the annual setting. We just got a hold of a power grazer here 2 weeks ago, so that's been a new addition to the farm. Pretty excited to see where we utilize that. Obviously, a different product. It's a higher poly rope, different from the aircraft cable that we've been using. So we'll see what works the best. We've been double fencing a lot in corn, just in case we get into a position with a high snow load, so that we can utilize the bipolar option on the fencers that we use, just to give the cows a bit of a better crack when there is more guarding them from the ground, I guess I would say, if there's more snow. So yeah, there's going to be, obviously we'll continue to change, but really splitting up our paddocks in winter grazing systems has been worth it for us, both on just controlling them in that crop, and a high utilization rate, and really impacting as many acres for manure distribution side of things, and just clean up overall on that crop, instead of giving them a great big range. And well, maybe they'll eat the part close to the water bowl really good, but they're not going to get to that far corner. If we can do more fencing in the fall and put ourselves in a position where the cows are going to go out to that far corner to clean it up, we're just going to see better benefits across the entire farm. So yeah.
Right, definitely. Well, that is a lot of information for people listening to take in, and it's amazing. Where can people get a hold of you if they have questions?
Definitely just by email or phone number. Check me out, I guess, I got Facebook or Instagram or Twitter as well. And please feel free to check out the Covers & Co. website. We've got our contact information on there, coversandco.ca. I believe that. And then, yeah, just check out my name at Connor English on Facebook or Twitter. You can probably find me there. And yeah, if you know someone that might have my phone number, if you're not checking out the website, please feel free to give me a call whenever to chat about anything.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Ruminating. I really appreciated chatting with you, Connor. And I want to hear, so keep in touch because I want to hear exactly what's been going on and find out how your winter went.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me today, Amber, and we'll be in touch in the future, I'm sure.
You bet.